Most of us are conditioned to avoid negative thoughts like the plague. From a young age, we're told, don't think bad things. Stay positive. Focus on the good. We plaster over worry with motivational quotes, distract ourselves from fear with entertainment, and suppress any dark possibility that might creep into our minds. The modern world has become obsessed with positivity, often equating it with strength. But what if the opposite is true? What if the real key to resilience and calm isn't hiding from the worst, but daring to face it directly? This is where the ancient practice of negative visualization comes in, a technique developed and refined by the Stoics of ancient Greece and Rome. Far from being gloomy pessimists, these philosophers were among the most practical thinkers in history. They believed that life was unpredictable, fragile, and full of sudden change. Wealth could disappear overnight. Fame could vanish in a moment. A loved one could be taken by fate without warning. And instead of pretending these truths weren't real, the Stoics leaned into them. They would deliberately imagine loss, disaster, and hardship, not because they enjoyed suffering, but because doing so made them stronger. Think of it this way. Soldiers don't train only in sunshine and comfort. They prepare in harsh conditions, under stress, simulating battle so that when chaos comes, they're not caught off guard. Negative visualization works the same way for the mind. By rehearsing the worst in your imagination, you remove its sting. You walk through possible disasters ahead of time so that if they ever do arrive, you meet them with calm steadiness instead of blind panic. Paradoxically, this exercise doesn't make life feel darker. It makes it brighter. When you imagine losing your comforts, you start to cherish them more. The meal in front of you, the health you enjoy, the people around you, all suddenly feel like gifts rather than guarantees. What once felt ordinary now feels precious. Far from dragging you into despair, negative visualization awakens gratitude. It also dismantles fear. Much of our anxiety doesn't come from reality itself, but from uncertainty. The vague sense that something bad might happen is often more terrifying than the bad thing itself. When you sit down and actually picture what could go wrong, losing a job, being embarrassed in public, failing at a project, you strip away the fog of uncertainty. You realize that while unpleasant, most of these events are survivable. You start to see that you are more capable, more adaptable, and more resilient than you thought. The Stoics knew a deep truth. We cannot control life, but we can control our response. Negative visualization trains that response. It turns fear into preparation, fragility into strength, and passivity into courage. Instead of avoiding reality, it teaches us to embrace it fully, with all its unpredictability and loss. And in doing so, it gives us an unexpected gift: a calmer mind, a lighter spirit, and a heart that no longer trembles at shadows. But here's the most surprising part. This isn't just philosophy. It's psychology backed by modern science. Research on mental rehearsal shows that the brain responds almost the same way to imagined scenarios as it does to real ones. That means when you visualize the worst, you're actually training your nervous system to remain steady under pressure. You're building a kind of mental muscle memory that equips you for life's toughest moments. What the Stoics practiced intuitively, science now confirms. Visualizing challenges strengthens resilience. And so, negative visualization becomes more than just a mental exercise. It's a way of life. It's not about wallowing in dark thoughts or expecting the worst, but about preparing the mind so it is never enslaved by fear. In a world obsessed with comfort and positivity, it's a radical act of courage to face life's harshest possibilities head-on. But those who dare to do it find themselves rewarded not with despair, but with an inner strength that few ever discover. 1. Builds gratitude for what you have. Gratitude is often spoken about in modern culture, but most of the time it's treated as something shallow, making a quick list of blessings, writing down 3 things you're thankful for, or repeating affirmations about abundance. While those practices aren't useless, they often fail to move us deeply because they stay at the surface level. True gratitude isn't just about reminding yourself that you have good things. It's about feeling their value in your bones. And this is where negative visualization becomes a powerful tool. When you take a moment to imagine losing something you hold dear, its importance suddenly sharpens. Picture waking up tomorrow and realizing your health has declined. You can no longer walk freely or breathe easily. Imagine coming home to an empty house, the laughter of your loved ones gone, their presence replaced by silence. Consider what it would mean to lose your job, your financial stability, or even the simple comfort of a warm bed. These thoughts are not pleasant, but they're eye-opening. By envisioning their absence, you immediately sense just how precious these things really are. What you once overlooked as normal begins to feel like a miracle. The Stoics believed that one of the greatest obstacles to happiness is taking things for granted. We become so accustomed to comfort and stability that we stop noticing them. Hot water flows from the tap, and we call it ordinary. Our body carries us through the day without pain, and we barely acknowledge it. The people we love smile at us, share meals with us, and we assume they'll always be there. Negative visualization shatters that illusion of permanence. It reminds us that everything we have today, our relationships, our possessions, our opportunities, can vanish in an instant. And with that reminder comes a deep, almost overwhelming gratitude. Psychologists today call this the contrast effect. When you compare your life only to what you want but don't yet have, you feel restless and unsatisfied. But when you compare your life to how it could be if you lost what you already possess, appreciation naturally arises. This isn't about being gloomy. It's about widening your perspective. Instead of focusing on what's missing, you realize how rich you already are. Think about something as simple as a meal. If you rush through it, scrolling on your phone, it's just food on a plate. But if you pause and imagine not having eaten in days, suddenly each bite feels sacred. The texture, the flavor, the warmth, it all becomes magnified. The same applies to relationships. A simple conversation with a parent, a hug from a child, or laughter with a friend can feel routine. But when you remind yourself that these moments won't last forever, you treasure them in real time. The hidden power of this practice is that it doesn't just build momentary gratitude, it changes your entire outlook on life. Instead of complaining about small inconveniences, you begin to notice how much is actually going right. Instead of constantly chasing more, you find contentment in what's already present. Gratitude becomes not just a thought, but a felt experience. In short, by imagining the absence of what you love, you discover the fullness of having it. That is the gift of negative visualization. It turns the ordinary into extraordinary, the unnoticed into cherished, and life itself into something worth savoring every single day. 2. Reduces. Fear of loss. Fear of loss is one of the greatest sources of human anxiety. We fear losing our health, our wealth, our status, our loved ones, and even our own sense of identity. Much of our daily stress isn't rooted in what is happening right now, but in the haunting thought of what could be taken from us in the future. This constant background worry weakens us, makes us cling too tightly to possessions and people, and often prevents us from fully enjoying the very things we're afraid of losing. Negative visualization offers an antidote to this fear. By deliberately rehearsing loss in your mind, you face the monster head-on instead of letting it chase you from the shadows. Imagine, for instance, what it would be like to lose your job. At first, the thought is terrifying, but when you sit with it, you begin to see how you might adapt. Maybe you downsize, take temporary work, lean on savings, or even discover new opportunities you had ignored before. The initial shock fades, and what remains is a deeper truth. Loss might be painful, but it is rarely fatal to the spirit. The Stoics practiced this regularly. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, reminded himself that wealth and status were always temporary. By rehearsing the thought of losing them, he reduced his dependence on them. If fortune struck and he lost everything, he would not collapse, because he had already lived through it in his mind. In modern terms, This practice strengthens what psychologists call psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances without breaking down. When you do not train yourself to confront loss, fear controls you. You cling desperately to people and things, smothering them with attachment and anxiety. But when you regularly remind yourself that loss is part of life, you loosen your grip. You love more freely, without desperation. You live with your possessions without being owned by them. And most importantly, you stop trembling at the thought of change because you have rehearsed how to endure it. Ironically, the more you prepare for loss, the less it controls you. Fear shrinks when it is acknowledged. Just like practicing a speech reduces stage fright, imagining loss reduces the terror of it actually happening. Instead of being blindsided, you walk into life's challenges with a steady mind, already knowing that even if the worst happens, you will not be destroyed. This doesn't mean you become careless or indifferent. Quite the opposite. You care more deeply. You hug your loved ones with sincerity because you know you may not always have that chance. You use your resources wisely because you know they are not guaranteed. But you no longer live in fear of losing them because you have already made peace with the possibility. In the end, negative visualization reminds you of a profound truth. You are stronger than you think. You are capable of surviving loss, of rebuilding, of finding meaning even in hardship. Once you realize this, fear loosens its grip on your heart. What once felt terrifying becomes manageable, and what once seemed like fragility transforms into quiet, unshakable resilience. 3. Strengthens emotional resilience. Life is unpredictable, and no matter how carefully we plan, setbacks and hardships are inevitable. What separates those who crumble from those who remain steady is not luck, but resilience, the ability to recover quickly from difficulties. Emotional resilience is like armor for the mind and spirit, and negative visualization is one of the most powerful ways to build it. When you mentally rehearse worst-case scenarios, you're giving your nervous system a kind of training ground. Just as athletes prepare their muscles under stress, you prepare your emotions under imagined pressure. By picturing disappointment, rejection, or failure, your body and mind learn not to panic in the face of adversity. Instead of being shocked when life delivers a blow, you meet it with a calm steadiness that has been built through practice. Think about the difference between someone who has never considered loss and someone who has visualized it many times. The first person is like a fragile glass. When struck, they shatter. The second person is like tempered steel, bent but not broken. Negative visualization tempers the mind in this way. It inoculates you against the paralysis of fear and the overwhelming waves of emotion that can strike when you are unprepared. Modern psychology supports this ancient practice. Studies show that exposure to stress, even in controlled or imagined doses, reduces long-term vulnerability. It's the same principle behind exposure therapy, where patients gradually confront fears in safe, manageable steps until their anxiety diminishes. Negative visualization works similarly. By rehearsing pain, embarrassment, or hardship in your imagination, you reduce its power over you in reality. For example, if you imagine failing a public presentation, your voice cracking, people laughing, silence hanging heavy, you may feel discomfort in your mind, but once you've lived through it mentally, the real experience won't paralyze you. You'll realize that even if it happens, it won't destroy you. The fear loses its grip, and resilience takes its place. Another benefit is emotional balance. Life's challenges often provoke extreme reactions: anger, despair, panic, or denial. But someone who has practiced negative visualization develops a steadier temperament. Instead of being swept away by emotional storms, they become like a seasoned sailor, able to navigate rough waters without capsizing. This doesn't mean you stop feeling emotions. Far from it. You still experience sadness, frustration, or grief. The difference is that these emotions no longer control you. You become capable of acknowledging them without being consumed by them. You feel the weight of life's difficulties, but you don't collapse under them. Ultimately, strengthening emotional resilience through negative visualization gives you confidence. You no longer live in fear of being broken by circumstances. You trust your ability to endure, adapt, and recover, and this trust becomes a source of calm strength, allowing you to face the uncertainties of life not with dread, but with quiet courage. 4. Prepares you for reality. One of the greatest mistakes we make in life is assuming that things will go smoothly. We expect health to remain, friendships to last, careers to progress, and plans to unfold exactly as we imagine. But reality rarely works that way. Life is unpredictable, often disruptive, and sometimes harsh. The question is not if you will face setbacks, but when. Negative visualization functions as mental training, preparing you for these inevitable disruptions before they arrive. Think of how soldiers train. They don't just practice in calm environments, they prepare in mud, under stress, and in simulated combat so that real battles won't catch them off guard. Firefighters drill with fake flames, pilots rehearse emergency landings, athletes push themselves through extreme scenarios, all to be ready for the unexpected. Why should the mind be any different? By visualizing worst-case scenarios, you are essentially running mental drills. You expose yourself to possible outcomes so that if they come, you're not shocked or paralyzed. You're ready. For example, imagine you've prepared yourself for the possibility of losing your job. You've pictured what steps you would take, cutting expenses, seeking new opportunities, or leaning on temporary support. If that loss actually happens, your mind doesn't spiral into panic. Instead, it recalls the drill. You already have a blueprint. You move more quickly into problem-solving mode because you've rehearsed it in advance. The Stoics believed that most suffering comes not from events themselves, but from being unprepared for them. When something unexpected happens, people often waste precious energy in denial, anger, or shock. How could this happen to me? But the one who has already visualized the possibility accepts it more calmly. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means facing reality without wasting energy on disbelief. From there, you act more effectively. Negative visualization also sharpens awareness. It reminds you that life's stability is fragile, which prevents complacency. Instead of drifting through days on autopilot, assuming tomorrow will mirror today, you remain alert to the fact that things can change. This awareness doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you practical. You're less surprised by challenges and more appreciative of calm periods because you know they're temporary. In modern psychology, this process resembles stress inoculation training, a method where people are exposed to manageable amounts of stress in order to build coping strategies before larger stressors arrive. By imagining possible difficulties, you inoculate yourself against the shock of reality. Life still delivers challenges, but they no longer feel alien to you. They feel like something you've already encountered in your mind. Ultimately, negative visualization doesn't make you pessimistic, it makes you prepared. Just as a firefighter doesn't hope for flames, but trains for them anyway, you don't wish for misfortune, but you rehearse it. That preparation means when reality shifts, when plans crumble, when losses strike, when life surprises you, you meet it not with fear, but with readiness. And in a world as uncertain as ours, readiness is a form of power. 5. Makes you less entitled. One of the subtle dangers of modern life is entitlement, the quiet assumption that things should go our way. We expect comfort, safety, health, convenience, and even happiness as if they are owed to us. When reality doesn't match those expectations, we feel frustrated, bitter, or even cheated. But negative visualization breaks this illusion. By reminding yourself that nothing is guaranteed, you approach life with humility rather than entitlement. And that humility makes setbacks much easier to endure. Imagine, for a moment, waking up tomorrow without electricity, without running water, or without your phone. For many people across the world, this isn't a thought experiment, it's daily life. Yet when it happens to us, even briefly, we treat it like a crisis. Why? Because we assumed those comforts were permanent. Negative visualization asks us to flip this mindset. Instead of assuming we deserve comfort, we remind ourselves it's a privilege that can disappear at any time. The Stoics practiced this regularly. They knew that by rehearsing loss, they could lower their expectations of the world. Marcus Aurelius wrote that each day should be approached with an awareness that people may disappoint you, events may frustrate you, and plans may collapse. If you expect perfection, you will always be disappointed. If you expect imperfection, you meet difficulties with calm acceptance. Entitlement fuels anger, but humility disarms it. This humility also transforms how you see blessings. If you stop assuming that health, freedom, and relationships are guaranteed, you begin to see them as gifts. Every simple pleasure, warm food, a friend's kindness, even a moment of peace, feels richer when you know it isn't owed to you. Gratitude grows in the soil of humility. The less you demand from life, the more you appreciate what it gives. Modern psychology echoes this truth. Studies show that people who believe they are owed good fortune often struggle more with stress and depression when reality falls short. In contrast, those who adopt a mindset of humility and acceptance recover faster and report greater satisfaction. By lowering unrealistic expectations, you actually raise your ability to cope with hardship. Think about it in practical terms. If you believe your career, relationships, or possessions are guaranteed, any disruption feels like an injustice. But if you remind yourself daily that all of these things are fragile and temporary, setbacks no longer shock you. They may sadden you, but they do not crush you. You suffer less, not because life is easier, but because you no longer carry the burden of entitlement. In the end, negative visualization teaches a powerful lesson. You are not owed anything by the universe. Life does not operate on contracts or guarantees. And paradoxically, this realization doesn't make life gloomier, it makes it brighter. When you stop expecting life to bend to your will, you discover the beauty of accepting it as it is. Every good moment becomes a gift, every setback becomes bearable, and humility becomes a shield against bitterness. 6. Increases present moment joy. Most of us spend our lives racing forward, planning for the future, replaying the past, or chasing after things we don't yet have. In the process, we overlook the simplest joys already present in our daily lives. We eat without tasting, we walk without noticing, we talk without truly listening. The practice of negative visualization interrupts this cycle and brings you back to the present moment. By imagining the absence of what you currently enjoy, you awaken a deeper appreciation for it right now. Take something as ordinary as a warm meal. If you rush through it while distracted, it feels like nothing more than a necessity. But if you pause and picture what it would be like to go without food for days, the plate in front of you transforms. The aroma, the flavor, the nourishment, it all becomes a small miracle. Negative visualization sharpens the senses by reminding you that what you're experiencing isn't guaranteed, and therefore, it should be savored. The same applies to health. Most people don't notice their bodies until something goes wrong. But if you close your eyes and imagine losing the ability to walk freely, breathe easily, or see clearly, suddenly the simple act of standing, running, or looking at the sky fills you with joy. By rehearsing loss, you learn to value what you have before it's gone. This shift moves you out of distraction and into presence, where joy naturally arises. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus, once a slave, reminded his students that freedom, comfort, and life itself were temporary. By imagining their absence, they would cherish each moment they still possessed them. This isn't about wallowing in fear, it's about cultivating awareness. When you know something could be taken away, you stop sleepwalking through life and start engaging with it fully. Modern psychology supports this ancient wisdom. Studies on mindfulness and gratitude show that when people focus on appreciating present experiences, they report higher happiness and lower stress. Negative visualization acts as a bridge to mindfulness. By imagining the absence of what you love, you return to the joy of having it. Instead of postponing happiness for some distant future, you find it in the ordinary details of today. Consider relationships as well. A hug from a child, a conversation with a parent, or laughter with a friend can feel routine, until you remind yourself that these moments won't last forever. Suddenly, the hug feels warmer, the conversation deeper, the laughter more precious. The practice of negative visualization intensifies joy by revealing the fragility of time. Ultimately, this exercise teaches you to stop overlooking life. Joy isn't found only in grand achievements or future goals. It's hidden in the everyday, the food you eat, the air you breathe, the people around you. By imagining their absence, you awaken to their presence. And when you live this way, each moment becomes richer, fuller, and far more joyful than before. 7. Trains detachment from outcomes. One of the biggest sources of human suffering is the belief that our happiness depends entirely on external success. We convince ourselves, I'll finally be happy when I get that promotion, when I earn more money, when people admire me, when I achieve my goals. But life rarely unfolds in a straight line. Goals slip out of reach, plans collapse, and outcomes don't always match our effort. If your sense of worth and peace are tied completely to results, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Negative visualization helps break this chain by training you to detach your inner well-being from external outcomes. When you deliberately imagine failure, losing a job, not receiving recognition, missing a goal, you rehearse the possibility that things might not go your way. At first, this feels uncomfortable, even painful. But with practice, something shifts. You begin to see that your identity and worth are not destroyed by failure. You might feel sadness or frustration, but you survive. The world doesn't end. And in that realization comes freedom. The freedom to live and strive without being enslaved by the results. The Stoics emphasized this distinction clearly. Epictetus taught that some things are in our control, our actions, choices, and attitudes, while others, like recognition, wealth, or reputation, are not. By focusing only on what we can control and rehearsing the loss of everything else, we build detachment. Success becomes something we work toward, not something we depend upon. This doesn't make us careless or unmotivated. Rather, it allows us to give our best effort without being emotionally crushed if the outcome differs from our hopes. Modern psychology echoes this wisdom. Research shows that people who tie their happiness solely to achievement often live in cycles of stress, anxiety, and burnout. But those who cultivate intrinsic resilience, the ability to feel content regardless of external events, experience greater long-term stability. Negative visualization acts like a mental reminder. Even if this fails, I will be okay. That simple thought loosens the grip of fear and perfectionism. Consider this in everyday life. Suppose you're preparing for an important exam, presentation, or project. If your entire happiness depends on acing it, you may feel paralyzed with pressure. But if you've practiced negative visualization, imagining what you'd do if you stumble, you realize life goes on. You'll recover, try again, and still find meaning beyond the outcome. This calmness not only makes you more resilient, but ironically improves performance because you're not suffocated by fear of failure. Detachment doesn't mean indifference, it means strength. You still care deeply about your goals, but you no longer let them dictate your peace of mind. You approach success with humility and failure with grace. Negative visualization reminds you that external outcomes are unstable, but your inner strength can remain steady. And when your happiness rests on inner stability rather than external conditions, you become untouchable by the storms of fortune. 8. Reduces anxiety of the unknown. Much of human fear doesn't come from events themselves, but from the uncertainty that surrounds them. The unknown is like a fog. It hides shapes and shadows, making everything look more terrifying than it truly is. Our minds rush to fill that fog with worst-case assumptions, amplifying anxiety until it feels unbearable. Ironically, this vague dread is often more painful than the reality we eventually face. Negative visualization clears that fog. By deliberately and vividly imagining the worst possible outcomes, you strip them of their mystery. You see them clearly, in detail, instead of letting your mind swirl with half-formed fears. Once the monster under the bed is brought into the light, it usually looks far less menacing than you thought. The unknown becomes known, and known fears are easier to handle. The Stoics understood this well. They did not wait for life to surprise them. They rehearsed the surprises in their minds. Seneca advised he who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. In other words, when you've already stared down loss, failure, or hardship in your imagination, the real thing shocks you less. The anxiety is reduced, not because the danger disappears, but because you've already prepared yourself for it. Modern psychology also supports this idea. Cognitive behavioral therapy often involves exposure, facing feared scenarios in a controlled way until the fear loses its grip. Negative visualization is a Stoic form of this exposure. You confront uncertainty before it happens, so that when reality unfolds, you feel less ambushed. Imagine worrying about losing your job. If you avoid the thought, anxiety lingers as a vague shadow. What if? What if? What if? But if you confront it, okay, let's say I lose my job. What would I do? How would I manage? You realize you have options: savings, support networks, new opportunities. The fear shrinks. In short, negative visualization does not eliminate uncertainty, but it makes it less frightening. It transforms the unknown from a foggy, endless dread into something you've already walked through in your mind. You're no longer paralyzed by what-ifs because you've already seen them and survived them inside yourself. 9. Sharpens problem-solving skills. When you imagine failure, your mind naturally begins to search for solutions. Instead of asking, "How do I make sure nothing ever goes wrong?" an impossible goal, you shift to, "If things go wrong, what could I do?" This simple reframe builds flexibility, resourcefulness, and creative thinking. Negative visualization doesn't just prepare you emotionally, it trains your practical resilience. By rehearsing setbacks in your head, you start to mentally map escape routes and strategies. For example, if you visualize losing your wallet while traveling, you may think ahead about carrying backups, noting emergency numbers, or stashing some money separately. That thought exercise alone makes you more prepared than someone who never considered the possibility. The Stoics valued this adaptability. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about obstacles becoming opportunities, that every challenge contains within it the seeds of growth. Imagining worst-case scenarios forces you to see those seeds before the storm arrives. Instead of being blindsided by misfortune, you already have a toolkit of responses ready. In modern terms, this is a kind of mental simulation. Athletes visualize not only their victories, but also mistakes, how they'll recover from a slip, a miss, or an error. Military training uses the same principle. Soldiers run drills for scenarios that may never happen. So if they do, instinct and strategy kick in automatically. Negative visualization is a civilian version of this same mental drill. Think of everyday life. If you imagine your presentation failing, you might pre-plan backup slides or rehearse how to handle tough questions. If you imagine a trip being delayed, you may pack extra snacks or books. By rehearsing failure, you sharpen your ability to adapt rather than freeze. Over time, this makes you not only calmer, but also more competent. You stop being someone who crumbles when things don't go perfectly. Instead, you become the person who can say, "I saw this coming. I'm ready." Negative visualization doesn't just give you peace of mind, it equips you with practical resilience, turning fear into fuel for creativity and and problem solving. 10. Breaks the illusion of control. One of the hardest truths to accept is how little control we actually have over life. We plan, we prepare, we build routines, and yet accidents, illness, betrayal, and chance still shape much of our existence. The desire for complete control is an illusion, one that breeds frustration and suffering when reality inevitably shatters it. Negative visualization helps dismantle this illusion. By imagining scenarios that are beyond your control, natural disasters, sudden illness, the actions of others, you remind yourself that life is not entirely in your hands. At first, this may sound depressing, but paradoxically, it's liberating. Once you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you free up energy to focus on what is within your power, your attitude, your choices, your response. The Stoics drew this line clearly. Epictetus taught the famous dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, others are not. Negative visualization sharpens your awareness of this truth. When you imagine losing things you can't fully control, wealth, reputation, external approval, you prepare your heart for the reality that these things were never fully yours to command. Modern life constantly tempts us with the illusion of control. Apps that track every calorie, plans that predict every step, goals that demand certainty, but reality resists control. The more tightly you cling, the more shattering it feels when things slip through your fingers. Practicing negative visualization is like loosening your grip. It doesn't make you careless, but it prevents you from being crushed when the unexpected happens. Take, for example, driving. You can drive carefully, but you can't control every other driver on the road. Visualizing accidents doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you cautious, humble, and aware that ultimate control isn't possible. That awareness keeps you balanced. In essence, negative visualization reminds you of your true power and limits. You don't command fortune, but you command your soul. You don't own outcomes, but you own your response. And when you accept that, you no longer live in constant frustration at life's unpredictability. Instead, you live with humility, readiness, and calm acceptance of what comes. 11. Builds. Courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the ability to move forward despite it. Yet fear often grows out of proportion precisely because we avoid looking at it. The more we try not to think about something, the bigger and darker it becomes in our imagination. Negative visualization flips this dynamic. By deliberately rehearsing the worst-case scenario, you shrink fear down to its actual size. Imagine standing before a difficult challenge, giving a speech, starting a business, or confronting a conflict. Your heart races because the mind whispers, "What if everything goes wrong?" Instead of letting that vague fear paralyze you, negative visualization invites you to lean in. All right, let's say I stumble on stage. Let's say people laugh. Then what? I'll feel embarrassed, but I'll recover. Life goes on. By walking through the fear mentally, you discover it has fewer teeth than you thought. The Stoics trained this way. Seneca wrote that misfortunes lose their power when we have rehearsed them in advance. Soldiers don't become brave because they never feel fear. They become brave because they've practiced facing danger repeatedly. Negative visualization is the civilian's drill. It allows you to fight battles in your mind so that when real ones arrive, you've already met them before. Over time, this practice builds a steady, quiet courage. You no longer need to wait for perfect conditions or total certainty before acting. You've already accepted that setbacks may happen and that you will endure them. This makes you bolder, not reckless, but prepared. Fear doesn't vanish, but it loses its ability to dictate your choices. Instead of being driven by avoidance, you move with intention. When you've already looked your fears in the eye, the unknown feels less threatening. Each step forward becomes steadier, each risk less overwhelming. That's courage in its truest form. Not blind confidence, but a calm readiness that comes from rehearsing and accepting life's uncertainties. 12. Helps you distinguish real versus imagined threats. The human mind is a master of storytelling. Left unchecked, it invents threats, spins them into elaborate fears, and convinces us they are real. Sometimes we're haunted more by phantoms than by actual dangers. Negative visualization helps cut through this confusion by exposing which fears are grounded in reality and which are just illusions. When you visualize the worst, you're forced to examine it closely. What exactly am I afraid of? What would actually happen? This process strips away the vague haze of dread and reveals the structure of your fear. You may realize that some fears collapse under scrutiny. They were nothing but shadows. For example, the fear of embarrassment in front of strangers often fades when you imagine it fully. At worst, people forget in minutes and move on. Other fears, like financial insecurity, reveal themselves as legitimate, prompting preparation and planning. This distinction is powerful. Instead of being tossed around by nameless anxiety, you gain clarity. Some threats deserve action, others deserve dismissal. Marcus Aurelius practiced this by asking, does this thing outside of me really have the power to harm me, or is it only my judgment that gives it weight? Negative visualization forces you to run this test, separating genuine risks from imagined ones. Modern psychology agrees. Much anxiety is anticipatory. It feeds on what-ifs that never come true. But when you face those what-ifs directly, you can evaluate them rationally. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. Most of the monsters vanish when seen clearly. By distinguishing real threats from imagined ones, you waste less energy on illusions and redirect it toward true preparation. You stop living in constant, vague fear and start living with clarity. And clarity brings peace. 15. Strengthens mental discipline. The human mind is restless by nature. Left unchecked, thoughts scatter in every direction, pulled by impulses, distractions, fears, and fleeting desires. Most people never learn to direct their attention deliberately, which leaves them at the mercy of every emotional storm. Negative visualization, however, is an act of mental discipline. It requires you to intentionally guide your thoughts into uncomfortable territory instead of fleeing from it. Like an athlete training the body through resistance, you train the mind through deliberate confrontation with difficulty. At first, this can feel unnatural. The instinct is always to push fear away, to distract ourselves with entertainment, busyness, or comforting illusions. But when you sit down and choose to imagine illness, failure, loss, or humiliation, you are doing something radical. You are practicing staying. You resist the pull of denial and avoidance. And in that resistance lies strength. Each visualization becomes a small act of training. You face the discomfort, notice the emotions that arise, and learn that they do not destroy you. Over time, this repetition builds a steadiness in the nervous system. Instead of panicking when challenges come, your mind is conditioned to hold steady because it has rehearsed these storms before. The more you practice, the less reactive, fragile, and scattered you become. The Stoics understood discipline not as rigid control, but as mastery over the self. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to expect difficulty so he would not be surprised. Epictetus warned that without training the mind, we would be dragged around by every impulse. Negative visualization is one of the simplest, yet most profound methods of such training. In modern life, where distractions are endless and attention is constantly fractured, this practice is more valuable than ever. Each time you deliberately hold your mind to a hard truth, you sharpen its ability to focus, endure, and remain steady under pressure. Just as physical exercise builds resilience in the body, negative visualization strengthens the discipline of the soul. 16. Reduces envy and comparison. Few emotions poison the heart as quickly as envy. It twists joy into resentment and blinds us to our own blessings by constantly pointing at what others have. In today's world of social media and constant comparison, envy has become almost unavoidable. But negative visualization offers an antidote. By imagining the loss of what you already have, health, relationships, comforts, you reawaken gratitude. Suddenly, instead of obsessing over another's possessions or success, you feel deeply thankful for your own. This shift of perspective is powerful. Envy thrives on the assumption that what we have is secure and permanent. We look at others and think, why don't I have that? While forgetting that everything we currently enjoy could vanish tomorrow. Negative visualization disrupts this entitlement. When you reflect on impermanence, you realize that wealth, status, beauty, and even life itself are fragile gifts, not permanent possessions. Once you see this clearly, envy loses much of its power. Why resent someone else's fortune when you are busy appreciating your own? Why waste energy comparing when you could be cherishing the blessings in front of you? Instead of poisoning the soul with bitterness, you cultivate humility, gratitude, and peace. The Stoics frequently warned against comparison. Seneca reminded his readers that happiness does not come from what others possess, but from the value we place on what is already ours. By practicing negative visualization, you embody this wisdom daily. In modern terms, this means scrolling through social media with less bitterness, seeing others' successes without resentment, and living more contentedly within your own circumstances. By confronting loss in your mind, you become freer from envy because you see your life for what it is, fragile, temporary, and therefore precious beyond measure. 17. Deepens spiritual perspective. Negative visualization does not merely prepare you for setbacks. It also opens a doorway to something far deeper. When you imagine loss, failure, and even death, you confront life's ultimate truth: impermanence. Everything external, wealth, possessions, reputation, health, will eventually fade. This realization, rather than being depressing, can awaken a profound spiritual perspective. By facing impermanence, you begin to ask deeper questions. If everything external can be taken away, then where does true value lie? What cannot be destroyed? For the Stoics, the answer was clear: virtue, character, and the alignment of one's life with reason and nature. Epictetus insisted that the only true good was a well-ordered soul. Everything else was fleeting. Negative visualization acts as a reminder of this truth. By stripping away the illusions of permanence, it points you back to what lasts: wisdom, integrity, and love. It shifts your focus from the shallow chase for external validation to the deeper pursuit of inner wholeness. In this way, the practice becomes not just psychological resilience, but a spiritual discipline. Modern people often fill their lives with busyness and consumption to avoid thinking about death or loss. But when you dare to confront these realities, you live differently. Petty concerns lose their grip. Gratitude deepens, compassion expands, and you begin to live with a sense of reverence for life, for relationships, for the present moment itself. This is the higher gift of negative visualization. It doesn't just make you calmer under stress, it draws your eyes upward toward the eternal. You stop chasing illusions and instead invest in what cannot be taken from you: the quality of your soul, the depth of your love, and the wisdom with which you walk through the world. 18. Strengthens patience in daily life. Impatience is one of the most common sources of stress in modern life. Whether it's waiting in a long line, sitting in endless traffic, or dealing with delays at work, many of us feel irritation bubbling up the moment things don't go our way. This impatience often comes from an unspoken assumption that life should run smoothly, efficiently, and according to our preferences. But reality rarely bends to our expectations. Negative visualization helps us face this truth directly. By imagining delays, setbacks, and frustrations before they happen, we learn to meet them with acceptance rather than anger. Consider something as ordinary as a daily commute. If you expect it to take exactly 30 minutes, every extra red light or traffic jam feels like an injustice. But if, through negative visualization, you've already pictured the commute taking an hour, then when it does stretch out, you're not shocked or furious, you're prepared. The irritation loses its power because your mind already rehearsed the possibility. Likewise, if you imagine a friend canceling plans or a delivery being late, you meet the disruption with calm. Instead of being thrown off balance, you adapt with ease. This practice does more than reduce minor irritations. It fundamentally shifts your relationship with time and obstacles. Rather than fighting against reality, you move with it. You stop wasting emotional energy on anger and instead channel it into patience and perspective. Over time, this builds resilience. Frustrations that once made you anxious or resentful now feel lighter, almost irrelevant. You accept that perfection is an illusion, and life flows more peacefully when you release that expectation. In this way, negative visualization transforms patience from a forced virtue into a natural state of mind. You are no longer a prisoner of small frustrations. Instead, you cultivate flexibility, humility, and calm endurance. And this patience doesn't just make life smoother, it makes you stronger, because a patient person is far less shaken by life's inevitable delays and setbacks. 19. Enhances. Leadership and decision-making leadership, in any form, whether guiding a family, running a business, or managing a team, requires the ability to face uncertainty. Every choice carries weight. Every action has consequences, and often, the fear of making the wrong decision can create hesitation, paralysis, or reckless reactions. This is where negative visualization becomes a powerful tool. By deliberately imagining the worst-case outcomes, a leader gains the clarity and composure needed to make thoughtful, prepared choices. Take the example of a business leader. If they only imagine success, they may overlook risks. But if they actively picture a financial downturn, supply chain disruption, or the loss of a major client, they are forced to prepare for those realities in advance. They might build stronger reserves, diversify resources, or design contingency plans. Then, if difficulty strikes, they're not scrambling in panic. They already know the steps to take. The same is true in parenting. A parent who visualizes their child struggling with failure can prepare themselves to respond with patience, guidance, and encouragement instead of shock or frustration. Beyond preparation, negative visualization sharpens judgment. By imagining how plans could fail, leaders naturally ask better questions. What could go wrong? How would we adapt? What resources do we need in place? This proactive mindset leads to wiser decisions. Leaders become more flexible, more strategic, and less reactive. And when challenges arise, as they always do, they are able to stay calm because their minds have already rehearsed such scenarios. Perhaps most importantly, this calmness radiates outward. People trust leaders who remain composed in the face of chaos. When others panic, a steady leader becomes an anchor. Their presence inspires confidence because it signals preparation and strength. In this way, negative visualization doesn't only build resilience in the individual, it strengthens entire groups, families, or organizations. Ultimately, a leader shaped by negative visualization leads not through fear, but through foresight. They are not paralyzed by uncertainty, nor blinded by naive optimism. Instead, they are grounded, ready, and wise. This ability to walk into challenges without being shaken is one of the highest marks of true leadership. 20. Cultivates acceptance of mortality. At the heart of Stoic practice lies the most powerful form of negative visualization, contemplating death. For many, this sounds dark or even frightening, but it is precisely this fear that keeps people from living fully. By deliberately imagining the reality of mortality, your own and that of your loved ones, you remove its paralyzing grip and gain a deeper appreciation of life. When you reflect on death, ordinary moments take on extraordinary meaning. a simple conversation, a walk in the evening, a shared laugh with a friend. All of these become precious because you recognize they are not guaranteed to last forever. Instead of living distracted, rushing, or taking things for granted, you slow down and savor what is in front of you. Every day becomes more vivid when you know it is not infinite. This practice also frees you from the terror of endings. By rehearsing mortality in the mind, death loses its sting. It is no longer an unspoken shadow lurking in the distance, but a reality you have already faced with courage. When that day comes, as it will for all, you meet it not with shock, but with calm acceptance. And in the meantime, you live with greater urgency, clarity, and gratitude. For the Stoics, contemplating mortality was not morbid, it was liberating. It reminded them that life is short, fragile, and not within our control. But it also reminded them that meaning lies in how we live today, with virtue, love, and wisdom. Negative visualization of death, paradoxically, makes life brighter. It teaches you not to cling in fear, but to live in freedom. By embracing the inevitable, you discover the art of truly living. In fact, many of history's wisest minds, from Marcus Aurelius to Montaigne, have argued that only by contemplating death can one learn to live. The awareness of mortality strips away trivial concerns. Petty arguments, endless comparisons, and shallow pursuits lose their power when measured against the brevity of life. What remains is what truly matters: kindness, courage, and the pursuit of wisdom. Death, instead of being a curse, becomes a teacher that guides us back to the essentials. And perhaps the greatest gift of this practice is peace. When you accept mortality, you stop fighting the inevitable. Fear dissolves, and in its place grows serenity. You understand that while you cannot control how long you live, you can control how well you live. Each day becomes a conscious choice to embody virtue, to love deeply, and to leave behind something meaningful. In this way, negative visualization doesn't just prepare you for death. It prepares you to live a fuller, freer, and more luminous life. Negative visualization is often misunderstood. To some, it sounds bleak, pessimistic, or even morbid. But in truth, it is not about dwelling on tragedy. It is about preparing the mind to meet life with strength. The Stoics never practiced it to wallow in despair. They used it to strip fear of its grip. When you repeatedly imagine the possibility of loss, pain, or failure, those outcomes no longer terrify you. You've already walked through them in the safety of your mind. What once felt overwhelming now feels survivable. By rehearsing the worst, you paradoxically free yourself to live the best. A man who has imagined poverty appreciates his modest comforts more than a king obsessed with luxury. A woman who has visualized the loss of loved ones cherishes every ordinary moment with them. Negative visualization transforms fragility into resilience and anxiety into calm presence. It teaches you that nothing outside your character is truly guaranteed, yet within you lies the power to endure anything. Life, of course, will always bring storms. No one escapes loss, setbacks, or the final certainty of death, but the difference lies in how we meet them. Without preparation, the storm crushes us. With preparation, we may bend, but we do not break. Negative visualization equips you with a kind of spiritual armor, not heavy, not rigid, but flexible, steady, and light. You can step into uncertainty not with panic, but with calm preparedness. This practice is, in the end, a paradox. By imagining shadows, you create space for light. By contemplating endings, you deepen your appreciation of beginnings. By facing loss, you awaken to the miracle of what is still here, right now. The Stoics remind us that wisdom doesn't come from avoiding life's difficulties, but from training the heart to stand firm in their presence. Negative visualization is not a denial of life, it is the deepest affirmation of it.